Yeah, we have to.
I'd like to welcome everyone to this very important presentation by Rabbi Professor Avraham Steinberg. Professor Steinberg is known to all of us and known worldwide in his many, many capacities. He's director of the Medical Ethics Unit of Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center in Yerushalayim. He's co-chairman of the Israeli National Council on Bioethics. In 1999, he won the Israel Prize for his original rabbinic literature for his 7-volume Encyclopedia Hilchatit Refuit in Hebrew, the most comprehensive textbook ever compiled on the subject, later translated into English. He is director of the Torah Literature Publishing Group, Yad Harav Herzog, head of the editorial board of Encyclopedia Talmudit, and much, much more. Most importantly, he is a friend and inspiration and a mentor to many of us. And we thank him very, very much for his generosity in sharing his wisdom and his insight and his counsel. Pardon the dog in the background. I couldn't plan on that. The program today is being sponsored with the generosity of Rabbi Steinberg by the Rabbinical Council of America, by the Encyclopedia Talmudit, by National Council of Young Israels, both here in North America and in Israel, the Religious Zionists of America, and many other friends of Professor Steinberg. So thank you very, very much. Before he begins, I'd like to introduce Benny Gore, who is the power behind the throne. So much and so many important things for the encyclopedia and for Klal Yisrael.
Toda Rabba Rav Edrach. It's so a big moving moment for us because we had over 200 people from really all over the world who registered to participate online on this Zoom meeting and also to receive the recording and the special file with the halachot that Professor Steinberg is offering to each and everyone that have interest in that. At this moment, actually, we are fulfilling the message, the prophet message, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah udvar Hashem miYerushalayim. We have people here on this meeting from North America, from United States, East and West, from Canada, from Australia, from South Africa, from England, from Switzerland. And it's really so unique to have this feeling that actually Torah is covering all over the world. And Baruch Hashem, Professor Steinberg has the willingness and the willpower to share his outstanding knowledge in Refuah v'Halacha with all those who like to know in depth the Ilchot Pesach from the aspect of Refuah v'Halacha. As all of you know, Professor Steinberg is an Israel Prize winner on a special encyclopedia in medical issues and Refuah v'Halacha. And his last composition, I would like to show it here. This is the series of 6 books he just published, Refuah v'Halacha, which is covering actually the whole aspects of Refuah v'Halacha issues in the whole spectrum of life. And the special chapter will be offered to all of you that will have interest in getting that. I would like to conclude with Birkat Chag Sameach to all of you. And I wish, because we have a recording here, all of you would like to distribute this special shiur, please do so. Toda Rabba, very special Toda Rabba to Rav Mar Edrach, who is a great friend of Torah, grandfather of the Encyclopedia Talmudit. And by his leadership, the RCA is really blooming. And I wish him to continue his mission in the Jewish world. Toda Rabba v'yishar koach. Arav Professor Steinberg, bevakasha.
Thank you very much. I really thank Rabbi Drach for all his friendship, his support, the organization of this meeting, and many other mutual things that we are doing and hope to do in the future. And thank you, Benny, for the introduction. I will share the screen. Can you see the?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, shalom from Yerushalayim. I can't say good evening. Some people it's only good afternoon, and some people it's a different hour and maybe already in the middle of the night. So anyway, shalom is a neutral term. As you can see, the set of the Talmud Encyclopedia, which Baruch Hashem, we are progressing very well and in a very speedy way without compromising the quality. Volume Memchet is almost finished in the printing house. It's being bound now, and hopefully even before Pesach, it will come out. And we are already working on volume Memtet. We also have a micropedia Talmudit, which is an abridged format of the entries of the Talmud Encyclopedia in a very special way. And we are just at the letter Lamed. At the Talmud Encyclopedia, we advanced a little more. We're in the progress of completing this as well. As was mentioned, the material that I'm going to discuss this evening is taken from the work Harefuah K'Halacha, which has a special chapter on Hilchot Pesach, Lachole veLarofeh. And I am very grateful to the Talmudic Encyclopedia, which long before I became the head of the editorial board, I used it and I continue to use it for my work, and I'm sure many use it for their works because it really it's all-encompassing work. What's going on? Okay, so I'll go through some of the issues that are relevant to Pesach for a patient or a physician where things have to be done a little differently. So obviously we start with Bedikat Chametz, and the question is if someone is hospitalized on Yud Gimel Benisan in the evening, what should he do in the room that he is hospitalized? So this room is not regarded as a sachir, which according to the Shulchan Aruch depends who has the key, the owner or the one that rents the room, and whoever has the key, he is the mechuyav, he is obligated to do the bdikat chametz. But a patient in a hospital room is not someone who is renting the room, and therefore he is exempt from doing bdikat chametz of the entire room. But according to Abel Yashib, he should nevertheless do bdikat chametz on the little cabinet next to his bed, because he may have put some food there and it shouldn't be obvious and available, but that is not the real chiyuv of bdikat chametz, and therefore it should be done without a bracha. Now, in a hospital or sometimes in a hotel room or other places of this kind, it is very unsafe to do the bdikat chametz with candles. And therefore, he should do the bdikat chametz with a panas, with a lighter, because that is okay to do it. And in fact, some even hold that nowadays having this, it's both better and safer even to do it at home. The reason we still do it with candles is because this was the minhag, and we continue minhag avoteinu biyadeinu to do it with a candle. But certainly in places where it's impossible to use candles, it is okay to use a panas, and the way that it's being checked is probably even better, but certainly safer.
Professor Steinberg, a panas is a flashlight.
Oh, flashlight, thank you.
A lighter
Okay.
is a flame, is an open flame, which would not
Right.
solve the problem.
Flashlight, thank you. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, a flashlight. I think that even at home, it points better than you can get to small places behind doors and in cabinets with a flashlight rather than with a candle. But as I said, it's a minhag, and people still want to keep their minhag. That's how our forefathers did it, and so on. But lehalacha, it's certainly a kosher way to do it. Now, if a patient is admitted in a hospital on Erev Pesach, which happens to be on Shabbat, which is not the case of this year. This year, Erev Pesach will be on Friday. But if it happens on Shabbat, then if he is being released prior to Shabbat, he should do the Bdikat Chametz at home when he comes home, even though it is the second day, because he wasn't home unless someone else could have done it for him. Now, a physician who is busy taking care of patients on the day of Erev Pesach, on 14 Benisan in the morning, and he didn't have a chance to burn the chometz before the time is to do it, and he is at that time in the hospital or somewhere taking care of a patient, it's sufficient that he should do the bitul wherever he is, and he doesn't have to go home back to burn the chometz. That's based on a Gemara that says that if someone goes for a dvar mitzvah and he is not at home at the right time to do the biur chometz, the actual burning of the chometz, it's sufficient to do bitul chometz. The biur is only an added thing, but if he's not at home at this time, that should be sufficient. Now, patients who are in a hospital where it is very difficult to give non-chometz, non-matzah food on the day before Pesach, on Erev Pesach, then it is permissible to use either matzah ashira or matzah that is not shmura, that wasn't purposely done for matzat mitzvah. So therefore, the patients in the hospital where there are many people and it's hard to feed them neutral, so to speak, food, then these are permissible. We usually try not to eat any matzah, not to have the time of the mitzvah, the taste of the mitzvah before the time that we should have the mitzvah done. But in such cases, and I assume in many other similar places, like in the army or other places where it's impossible to feed many people without it, that is permissible because it's only a minhag not to eat a taste of matzah unless it is a real matzah that is forbidden to be eaten on the day before Pesach. We have a minhag not to eat it even from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Some even are machmir, quote unquote, not to eat any type of matzah from Purim on, but these are all chumros and minhagim that in such situations don't have to be kept. Now let's go over some of the changes that we have to do in Leila Seder for patients and physicians. So a choile who is dangerously ill, who is not permitted because of his disease to eat either matzah or moro or to drink wine, because it is assumed by the physicians that this will cause him harm. So not only shouldn't he eat those things, even though they are mitzvahs, because pikuach nefesh is doiche the mitzvahs, but even if he did it, despite what the physicians told him not to do, if he is not mekayim the mitzvah, because this is like a machal also for him. It is something forbidden for him, and it's sort of a mitzvah ba avera, and therefore is not mekayim the mitzvah. So not only shouldn't he eat matzah more or drink wine, but he actually is forbidden to do it, and is not yotzeh if he did it. That is obviously simple for a chodesh sheyesh bo skana. If a patient who needs to undergo surgery, and it happens to be that his turn to have the operation is close to Leila Seder, and once he'll have the operation, he obviously will not be able to mekayem the achilas matzah and drink wine. He is not mechuyev to take out a very expensive cost in order to make the operation earlier so that he could do the mitzvah. But if he wants to go lifnim mishuat hadin, if he wants to do something that is not obligated, but something that is right and good, then he should do it. But lehalocha, he can keep the regular appointment for the operation, even though at the time when the mitzvah comes, he is unable to fulfill the mitzvah. How about a choile she'ein bo sakona? Someone who is sick, not dangerously ill, but he is so sick that he lies in bed, or he has significant pain or tsar, or other type of discomfort, but it's significant, and he might be damaged in one way or another if he will eat matzah mar or wine. So according to some poskim, he is similar to chole sheyesh bo skana, because at the moment the doctors tell him he shouldn't eat or drink the mitzvah stuff on Leila Seder, but others say that the mitzvah is still to be fulfilled if we are not talking about a choile sheyesh bo skana. Now, the reason is we find in the Gemara a few examples of Amoroim who drank the 4 koises of wine, and they had a significant headache up to Shavuos for almost 2 months because they drank the wine, and nevertheless they did it because a headache is not a dangerous situation, it is not pleasant, but according to the Gemara, it seems like there is a chiyuv to put himself into some discomfort. Now, there are ways to help patients to mekayem the mitzvah if in the regular way they can't do it. So there are several ways. One way is, if we're talking about matzah, one way is to change the way the matzah is presented. So usually the matzah is very hard, and some patients or even elderly people or people who have trouble with their teeth or people who have stomach discomfort, and for them it's very difficult to eat the shiur, which we'll discuss in a minute, the shiur of matzah in the regular way. Then one way, according to the Biur Halacha, how do you say in English, leforer?
To grind it or to make crumbs.
Make it into crumbs.
Put it into crumbs, which will be thin, and that will be easier for him to swallow it. Obviously, it's preferable to prepare it before Yom Tov, but if he does it by hand, then it is okay to do it even on Yom Tov if he right away eats it, and that is one way to ease the mitzvah of matzah. Another way is that if it's too dry for him, he can eat it when he puts it into liquid, into water, what we call matzah shruya, and it's preferable when you grind it, but matzah shruya can be okay. If he is a person that is makpid not to eat matzah shruya, but now this year he is sick or uncomfortable, and his only way to mekayem the mitzvah of matzah is by shruya, he has to do a Torah's nedorim because he did it for years before, and now he's changing his minhag, and it's only because he's not a choile shesh poskana, so he should do Hatoras Nedorim, but he can eat it shruya, even if in regular years he's makpid not to do it. Another way for some patients is to change the type of the matzah. And that particularly implies to patients who suffer from celiac disease that cannot eat regular wheat which contains gluten, and therefore he should eat a matzah made from certain wheat that does not include gluten, and then he can eat it regularly. Some poskim say that the first kezayis in Leila Seder, which is only a kezayis, and we'll discuss how much it is actually, but that's a small amount, and most celiac patients are not affected by a one-time small amount of gluten that they are absorbing, and therefore he is allowed to do it and make a broche, not like we said earlier that if physicians tell him you're not allowed to eat certain things which will damage you, then even b'diavad he's not mekayim the mitzvah. Here we are talking only on the first kezayis, which is the oraita, and which should be done the regular way, and most likely it will not affect it. But if he is very sensitive, and even this small amount of gluten will cause him diarrhea and abdominal pain, which can be prolonged, and he can't obtain matzah from other types that are without gluten, then he is potur like a choile sheyesh bo skana, and he doesn't need to eat the matzah at all. Nowadays, most celiac patients find ways to get flour of gluten-free, and therefore they can do it this way. A third way is regarding the shiurim, the shiur of the matzah. Now, as we all know, there is a machloikes. How do you, what are the shiurim nowadays compared to the days of Chazal? I don't want to go into the whole machloikes between the Grach Noe and the Chazon Ish, which only represent shittas which were known earlier than they just expanded on it. The Chazon Ish shitta is based on the Noida B'Yehuda, on the Tzlach, who found that the regular way to measure in Chazal's day, the basic measurement was the width of the thumb. And if you take the width of the thumb nowadays and you measure with it the volume of an egg, it turns out that the calculation in the days of Chazal and our calculation is almost double the size of the egg in Chazal's day. So the Chazon Ish decided, based on the Noida B'Yehuda, that the thumb measurement is stable, like in the days of Chazal, but all the others, the kezait and the kebeitza and the kekutevet, all these became smaller in our days, and therefore we have to double the amount of an egg or a kezait nowadays so that it will be in accordance with Chazal. So he came up with about 25 to 27 gram of matzah, which is the shiur of a kezait based on this measurement. Grach Noe has a different calculation and a different measurement, and his shiurim are much smaller, and that's lechatchila. According to the Grach Noe, between 13 and 15 gram of matzah is the real shiur that one fulfills the kezayis matzah. I just want to say one thing about the shita of the Chazon Ish. up to the Chazon Ish, most places, and Minhag Yerushalayim for sure was documented that it was like the Grach Noe. Even the Chofetz Chaim has someone inherited his Becher, his Kiddush Becher, and it was at the amount of the Grach Noe and not the Chazon Ish measurements. But the Chazon Ish, as I said, decided that the basic measurement in Chazal Shiurim is the width of the thumb, and he measured it to be 2.4 centimeters. Whereas the Grach Noe realized that if you measure it 2.4 centimeters, indeed the egg should be half the size of the days of Chazal, but his measurement showed that the average width of a thumb is only 2 centimeters. And if you take the 2 centimeters, you come up with the volume of an egg nowadays as it was in days of Chazal. So the eggs did not decrease in size as the Chazon Ish says. An interesting question regarding the Chazon Ish is, why did he assume that the thumb remained the same as in the days of Chazal, but all the rest, the egg and the olive and the kotevet and everything else decreased by 50%. It doesn't make sense to say that one type of fruit or product became smaller and the thumb remained the same. He realized it's a question. He has certain answers. It's very hard to understand this shita. I just want to add another point to it, that in archaeological findings, there is a great support to the Grach Noe. For instance, they found in Masada olive pits from the days of Masada, which is the days even prior to Chazal. And yet the size is the same size as today. It wasn't bigger twice as it is today, as it should be according to the Chazon Ish. So I don't want to go into the question whether archaeology is reliable or not. I think in this sense, it is reliable because we see it with our own eyes. It's not something that they tell us by this kind of measurement or that kind of measurement, it comes from 50 million years ago or things of this kind. That is not the case here. The case is that you see it and you know it was in Metzada and you know the dates when it was there, and yet it was like the Grach Noe says. So anyway, if someone is, the current approach of poskim is to say that in a Doraita issue, you go lechumra according to the Chazon Ish, and in the Rabbanon issue, you go lekula according to the Grach Noe. But if someone goes all the way with the Grach Noe, he actually follows the minhag that was in Yerushalayim and in many other places prior to the Chazon Ish. So anyway, if someone can't eat the full amount of the kezayis, he can eat the minimal shiur of the kezayit, which is according to the Chazon Ish only 20 grams, and according to the Grach Noe is around 10 grams, which is not a big shiur, so that even people who have difficulties to eat matzah can get along with this shiur. Now, another issue is, what is the pace of eating? There is a shiur called Kedei Achilat Pras, the time that it takes to eat half a loaf of bread, which was calculated in different ways, eating 3 eggs or eating 4 eggs. Won't go into the initial measurements, but in current measurements, it goes between 4 and 9 minutes, meaning the time that it takes from the beginning of eating to the finishing of eating should be within the range of between 4 and 9 minutes. So lechatchila, we try to finish it in 4 minutes, but someone who is sick or elderly or ill, he can go lekula and eat it slower up to 9 minutes. Now, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach once told me that if you want to take the shiur of the Chazon Ish of a matzah and finish the kezais within 4 minutes, this would be achila gasa. No one can eat it regularly and finish such a big shiur in such a small time. And since this is lechatchila the time you should eat, makes more sense that you should eat the kezais of agrach noah, which is a regular way of eating, and you can finish it within this time. So these are some ways to help patients who have difficulties with eating matzah. Now the same holds true about wine. If someone is not allowed to drink wine, like a diabetic patient or even a gestational diabetes, which at the time is not allowed to drink sweet wine, is allowed to use raisin wine, provided the raisins compose 17% or more compared to the water that makes it the mixture. And this is yoitze to be a regular wine. And the same is true to drink cooked wine and even grape juice. So if someone has difficulty with wine, he can have alternatives. If someone is not allowed to drink any wine and even not grape juice for whatever reason, but provided he is sick, he can use chemar medina, which is a kind of drink that people are drinking as an important mashke, where even if they are important guests, you would not be ashamed to serve it. But the first cup, which is the cup of Kiddush, not only the first cup of the 4 cups, but it is the cup of Kiddush. Kiddush you have to do only on wine and not on chemar medina. And therefore the alternative is to make Kiddush on the matzahs, like we sometimes do Kiddush on the lechem mishneh when we don't have wine or we can't drink wine. So here the matzahs will be the substance to make Kiddush on. Now, there is a shita, especially the Tosfos, but other Rishonim as well, that not all participants in the Seder have to drink the 4 courses of wine. It is only for the one who is making the Seder, who is reading, who is explaining, Orech Seder, and all the rest are yoitze by his drinking. So that if there are patients who are not allowed to drink wine of any kind, they can rely on this shita and be yoitze with the drinking of the one who is conducting the Seder without themselves drinking. Now, there was a debate whether or not grape juice is okay. There are some who are very makpid, it should be alcoholic, it should be real wine. But we have a Masorah that the Chazon Ish used grape juice for the Arba Koises, and I heard from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that he would mix the wine and the grape juice so that they'll have a shiur, which is a lot of wine to drink, but it will not be so alcoholic that he will not be able to think and to understand what he is saying and reading and not fall asleep in the middle of the Seder. So this is also what I personally do. I mix some wine and some grape juice and drink the shiur.
Professor Steinberg, I'm sorry to interrupt. If somebody is making Kiddush on matzah, they're going to wash and make hamotzi at the very beginning of the Seder and then not wait until motzi matzah when it would normally occur. Is that correct?
Right, right. By the way, if anyone has a shaila, please interrupt. I'm not promising answer to every shaila, but you can ask. That's okay. The same is with moral.
Continuation, may I ask a continuation of the previous question?
Yes.
if he's making kiddush on the matzot, does he say both brachot also al achilat matzah as well as a motzi?
No, achilat matzah he will say later.
Later with everybody else.
Yeah, when
Like
he's mekayim the mitzvah.
So at
Of
kiddush just a
achilat
motzi.
matzah. Here he's just doing the kiddush, so it's
Mhm.
only hamotzi lechem, like in a regular Shabbos that he doesn't have wine that he makes on lechem mishnah.
Now, which of the three matzot should he use? Or should he not use any of the three and take from extra?
No, he should do two extras. He doesn't need to use those. Those are for the
Huh.
Seder. The three
Right.
matzahs are for the Seder. He takes
Okay.
two separate matzahs, makes on them a moitzi, like he would do if he
For
doesn't have
Shabbat.
wine and he has
Right,
lechem
right.
mishneh regular.
Thank you.
Okay, now moro. So one way, if someone is not allowed to eat moro, although medically speaking, I don't know really such a situation that he can't eat a certain vegetable. As we all know, there are 5 types of vegetables that one can be yoitze moro. We use chasa, I think it's lettuce, right? We use chasa as the explanation of moro, the type of the 5 that are mentioned in the Mishnah and Psochim. And someone who can't eat chasa can eat one of the other types that are mentioned. The problem with it is, in principle, it's right, but how do we identify the others is not so easy, because they are mentioned in the Mishnah in language which even the Amoroim already weren't sure what the Tanoi meant. So even in this period of time, there was a change in identifying those vegetables. Certainly nowadays, it would be quite difficult. There are attempts to identify it, but I think that it would be very rare that someone has a disease that he can't eat lettuce, or he has an allergy to it, or he gets abdominal pain, and then he can try to use one of the others. Another way, the same as with matzah, is using a smaller shear, and since more nowadays is only the Rabbonon, that's agreed by everyone. Matzah, some of the parts of the matzah are certainly the Raisa, others might be not, but more is certainly, bisman that there is no Korban Pesach, it is only the Rabbonon, Zecher le Korban Pesach, for the time that we were Makriv Korban Pesach, so he certainly can be makel on the shear, even according to the Chazon Ish, and eat a smaller amount, which hopefully will not cause him any problems. Now, if a patient knows ahead of time that either his matzah or his moro or his wine, he needs to measure in order to see that he's eating or drinking the smallest shear, he should do it Erev Pesach, because weighing and measuring is a certain issue, although it's not a full issue. So if he forgot to prepare it and he still wants to be mekayim the mitzvah from mitzvah, he would be allowed to weigh it even during Leila Seder itself, but preferably is to measure it before. By the way, it is right to do it even for healthy people who want to know what is the shear of the cup that they are going to use for the Arba Koisos. Not every cup has the shear of Revit, which again depends on the Grach Noah and Chazon Ish. According to the Grach Noah, it's Begimatria Kos, which is 86 grams, and according to the Chazon Ish, it's Begimatria Kos Gadol, which is 150 grams. So if you want to be Yoitze the Chazon Ish, assuming that one of the Arba Koises or all of them are the Oraisa, then you should measure it before Leila Seder and know which Kiddush cup you should use that has the shear, and that is good for everyone. But a patient that knows that he'll need less, he should measure it before. Now, physicians are sometimes called to take care of patients during Leila Seder. It might be planned and it might be an emergency, and he has to leave before he starts the Seder itself, meaning reading the Agode and eating the matzahs and eating the more and drinking the wine. It depends how much time he has before he has to leave and go. And there's a whole schedule on what to say, what to do with all the mitzvahs of Leila Seder, based primarily of what is the Oraisa, what is the Rabbonon, what is a Minhag, and based on all these parameters, he can do according to the urgency of his leaving. So if he must leave urgently, there is no time, obviously, Pikuach Nefesh is doiche, and he is not doing the Seder, he's not eating matzah, he's not drinking arba koises, he has to take care of the patient. If he has time, there is a whole list here, I won't go through it, the recording will be before you, I hope you will be able to see it, so physicians who have some time and can spend a little, this is what is first priority to do, so that he will be mekayem the mitzvahs and read the parts of the Agode which are the fundamental parts, which are the more important parts, and skip all those that are added as a minhag. If he finished taking care of a patient before Chatzot, then obviously he still has time to finish what he missed at the beginning. But if he needs to be up all night and he has a little time after Chatzot, he is allowed to eat even after Chatzot, not to be hungry for his duty, even though Afikoiman has to be eaten before Chatzot and nothing else can be eaten after Afikoiman, because we need the taste of matzah to stay with us when we conclude the Seder. But that obviously is only a minhag, and therefore, if he is in need to eat afterwards, he would be allowed to do so. Now, issues related to Pesach itself. So if we have a choile sheyesh bo sakona, a choile that is dangerously ill, or obviously Sofex Kona has the same din, he is allowed to take any medication even if it's chometz, because obviously if he's choile sheyesh bo sakona, pikuach nefesh is doiche chometz, like it's doiche Shabbos, like it's doiche Yom Kippur, so that is a simple halacha. If he knows ahead of time that he will need a medication that is chometz, it is a good advice that when he buys this medication before Pesach in the pharmacy, he should tell himself and tell out that he does not want to be zoiche, to own this chometz, and not to pay for it before Pesach, because to swallow it, to take it, we said he is allowed. But to keep it, there's an issue of bal yero and bal yemotze. That has nothing to do with his sickness. So in order to avoid this issue, if he doesn't own it, if he didn't pay for it, and he didn't buy it halachically, then he's not over on bal yero and bal yemotze, and obviously he has to keep it in a hidden place so that by mistake someone who is not a choile sheyesh bo sakona shouldn't take it, and he should take it only when in need. Now, in order to avoid the issue of bal yero bal yemotze, although he is allowed to swallow it, but still it is there, we said that he can sell the medications like he is selling all his chometz to a goy, and therefore he is not the owner of the chometz stuff of the medication, but he is going to use it. And there is an issue with it, because if he sold it to the goy, how can he take it without the permission of the goy? Now it belongs to the goy. But since it's a choyle sheyesh bo skona, then the issue of stealing is also nidche, and therefore he is allowed to take it even without it. Obviously, he has to do bitul of the chometz, of the medication that is chometz. He can't burn it because he has to use it, but bitul he can do, and he shouldn't own it. Otherwise, he will become an owner of chometz, which is an issue of bal yireh bal yomotzi. The more frequently asked issues with medications on Pesach relate to a choyle she'ein bo skona. Choyle she'ein bo skona should be makpid, if possible, to use medications that don't include chometz. And indeed, nowadays in Israel, in the States, I think in many other countries, there are good bodies of people who check all the available medications and give a list which of the medications are without chometz, and if possible, the choyle she'ein bo skona should use those medications. From experience, there's hardly today any medication that you can't find a substitute that is kosher on Pesach. Certainly in Israel, because in Israel, they don't use alcohol at all in preparing all kinds of medical formulas, and therefore it's much easier. Places where they use alcohol, then if possible, try to find such alternatives that are kosher. Now, if it happens that this patient needs a medication that is not in the list of kosher, so if he can find a substitute, okay, but if not, and he's in need of it, then he should take it, because actually the chometz within a medication, unless it's something sweet, which will come in a minute, but a regular medication is both chometz nukshe and pasula achilat hakelev, and the shear is small, which was done before Pesach. So actually, truly speaking, there's no isur lechatchila to use medications of this kind, even if in the production there was some chometz involved, but it's now chometz nokshe, chometz she'eino raoi la'achilat kelev, and a choyle she'ein bo skona is allowed to use it. And in fact, interestingly, there is a tshuva in Minchas Shloimeh by Rav Auerbach, who goes through the halachas of the medications on Pesach, and as a note at the bottom of the original tshuva, he wrote, "Gam ani lo yadati lama yesh shemeod machmirim b'zeh." I just don't know why there are people who are so machmir on medication, because, as we said, that's chometz nukshe, it's chometz she'eino raoi la'achilat kelev, it's chometz b'ta'aroives. There are a lot of halachas that can take away the issue, and why are you so makpid? Interestingly, that at the second edition of the Tshuvas of Minchas Shlomo, which was composed already after he passed away, the editors omitted this sentence. So it seems like Shlomo Zalman was still adamant that you have to take only kosher medications, which he was not. And I don't know why they had to do it, but this is an interesting fact of censorship, which I think shouldn't be done. Now, important to realize, and that is accepted by Rav Elyashiv, by Rav Wosner, certainly by Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that if someone is used for a long time to a certain medication, and this certain medication is not in the list of kosher medications for Pesach, and even though there is a substitute that is kosher, he shouldn't do the substitution, because if someone is used to a certain type of a medication produced by a certain company, even though the basis of the medication can be identical to other companies, there are some parts of it that, if he's used to it, may cause damage or may cause complications, and therefore he should use what he is used to take and not go and look in the list, because it's irrelevant if he's a chronic high blood pressure patient or diabetic patient or kidney or renal failure or cardiac patient. He should take the medications that he is used to it, whether or not it is in the list. Now, if the medication is tasty, like pills that you suck or some kinds of solutions that things are added to make it tasty, then someone who is only a choile she'ein bo skona is not allowed to use it, because he has a noe from the chometz, as opposed to the other medications that we discussed up to now that are tasteless or even bitter and they're not tasty. Here we are talking about something tasty, and since chometz bePesach is also even b'mashu, so therefore he is not allowed to use it, but he can add to it something which will make it bitter, or if he can cover it with a thin layer of paper and swallow it, then there will be no hana'at garon, his throat will not enjoy the chometz, and that is permissible for choile she'ein bo skona. Important to realize that vitamins and food additives are regarded as food, not as medications, and therefore, for choile she'ein bo skona, they have to be kosher for Pesach. There's a whole host
Steinberg,
of, yeah.
where do lactate pills factor into that?
Where what? I didn't hear.
Lactate pills, someone who's lactose intolerant.
Yeah.
So which category would that fit into? Is that meaning, is that a choile she'ein bo skona?
Well, depends. If his lactose intolerance is severe, so that he gets significant stomach pain and diarrhea and vomiting, he is on the border of a suffix skona sometimes. Usually it's only a choile she'ein bo skona, but it depends on how severe it is. Many people think or feel that they are lactose intolerant, but actually it's very mild, that they feel a little bit abdominal pain, they can live with it. So that is certainly a choile she'ein bo skona. Okay, now all kinds of creams and bandages and injectable things or drops, all these usually have no questions on Pesach, and you don't have to question it, you can use it. Sometimes some creams can have alcohol, which is chometz, but he is not eating it. So since he's not eating it, even if it's a choile she'ein bo skona, if it was done before Pesach, and it is then not a shiur of mashu, but it is a ta'aroves, then he can use it on Pesach. If on Pesach they need to sterilize his skin with alcohol that is chometz before injection or before or in order to clean a wound, that is using chometz, although not swallowing it, and that, according to some, is not permissible, so preferably they should use something else to clean the area. Homeopathic medications, in Israel, most of them, or almost all of them, are not done with alcohol. So therefore, they are not chometz, and one can use it. Whereas abroad, in some countries, those homeopathic medications are using alcohol, which is chometz, and since homeopathic medications, according to regular medicine, are not something that are regarded as a refuah that even a chodesh she'en bo skona is allowed to take by isur, so he can't use it. However, homeopathic medications go through a lot of mixtures, one after the other, and sometimes actually nothing is left in the final product from the original. So even if they started with some chometz alcohol, by the time they did all the mixing, probably nothing was left from the alcohol. And if we know that this is the case, then one can use these medications as well. Finally, on those issues regarding false teeth in different ways, so the custom is to do hagala of the false teeth in kli sheni for fear that if you do it in kli rishon or on the fire, they may be damaged. And since people don't drink such hot chometz stuff that is like kli rishon, so the rule is kebolo kach polto, and if you're used to drink a level of heat of kli sheni, then it's sufficient, the halacha, to do it only in kli sheni. But it's preferable to be magil in kli rishon or irui mikli rishon, and the amount of heat should be around 70 degrees Celsius, which I think is around 150, 160 Fahrenheit, if I'm not mistaken. And then he is doing a better way of it. But the best way is on Erev Pesach not to eat something boiling, which is chometz, obviously, for the 24 hours before Pesach, so that when it comes to Erev Pesach, certainly kli sheni will be sufficient, because we know for sure, or he knows for sure, that the past 24 hours, he didn't consume any drink or food that is boiling, that is chometz. So that is probably the best way. Let me conclude with some brief halachas that came up during the COVID pandemic, especially when people were quarantined and they couldn't go out and they couldn't mix with other people. And some shilas came up on these issues. Luckily, I think in most places in the world, certainly in Israel, there is no lockdown anymore, and we behave regularly, and I hope it will stay like this. But I think it was of interest to deal with it. So already Erev Pesach, whoever is a firstborn, the minhag is that he should fast, but in order to exempt him from fasting, he can participate in a siyum. And this participation in the siyum, obviously, if he can do the siyum himself, is a sudas mitzvah that takes away the obligation to fast. But can we stop this?
He's also a little bit funny.
Can everyone please put on mute?
And that's it.
Okay. So if someone is quarantined Erev Pesach and he is a firstborn,
disturbing the shear.
if someone is a firstborn and is in quarantine and can't go to shul to hear a siyum, if he knows how, he should do a siyum himself. If he can't do a siyum of a Masechta Gemara, he can do a siyum of a Seder Mishnayos, or even one Masechta of Mishnayos. And according to Rav Moshe, even if he is learning one of the Nevi'im book, if he learns it, not just reading it, that is also sufficient to make a Sudat Mitzvah of a Siyum and be potur from the fast. And some of the poskim have said that if he can't come to shul or to a place where a siyum is being done publicly, he can listen to the siyum by phone or by video or by Zoom, and that way participate in the siyum, and that would be sufficient. Some issues that came about or regarding the prayers on Pesach. In most places nowadays, and there was a Minhag Ashkenaz, to say Hallel during Ma'ariv, which is the only time that we say Hallel during Ma'ariv and not only on Shachris. But according to the Vilna Gaon, that Hallel was done only when it is a tzibur, when there's a minyan. So therefore, if someone is quarantined and prays biyechidus, prays alone, he shouldn't say the Hallel of Leila Seder, of Ma'ariv. But others hold that the Ma'ariv of the Hallel of Ma'ariv is applicable also for one person. One of the issues that came up very strongly and difficultly is that if there are especially elderly people who have to be quarantined during Leila Seder and their family members can't join them and be with them, so they are all alone during Leila Seder, which is a very uncomfortable and a suffering situation for the people. So there was some suggestion to do the Seder, let's say by Zoom, so that the family that is conducting the Seder will be on Zoom with the elderly person, and so he will join them at least this way. But halachically, all these technologies are forbidden to be used on Yom Tov, certainly if Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, like this year, and therefore the poskim that dealt with this issue said that unfortunately he can't join by these technological advances. However, there was an interesting suggestion by one of the rabbis that some of the parts of the Leila Seder can be done already in the afternoon of Erev Pesach, because that was already the time where Korban Pesach was abroad during Beis HaMikdash, and therefore he can do some parts of the Seder which don't require after Tzeis HaKochovim, and that part he can do by Zoom with his family. So in Leila Seder, he'll only have to do alone those parts that have to be done at night. Okay, I think I'll stop here. Thank you for listening, and if there are questions.
Yes, Professor Steinberg, there is some questions in the chat. So I would appreciate if you can open the chat and go over from the very first part of it. You'll see a few questions, and if you can relate to that, please.
Or I can share with you if you'd like.
Yeah, I would prefer it. I'm not so good at it.
So from early in your discussion, if a person cleans his house and is certain that he will not find any chametz, does he still make the bracha on the bedika?
The answer is yes. In order to feel better from the Arizal and on, we are used to put, the minhag is to put 10 pieces of chometz spread around the house. Preferably, he should remember where it was put in order not to forget it and leave it for Pesach. And then the brocha is chal on that. But it's not part of the halacha. You do the brocha in order to do bdikas chometz, and that's what you do. If you didn't find, very good. You cleaned it well.
Thank you. So you discussed earlier about person going home on Yom Tov. So the question that was posed, what is advised for a patient who is discharged on Yom Tov? Is it better to go home with a non-Jewish driver? Is Uber better than a cab? Can a family member ride with them if they are going home that way? Is it better to try and stay in the hospital another day or to try to stay in an area of the hospital and go home after Yom Tov?
Okay, so all these options depend on the situation of the patient when he's discharged. Some patients are discharged totally healthy. They finished all the treatments. The hospital doesn't want to keep them anymore, but they are healthy. If they are healthy, there's no heter to drive on Shabbos or Yom Tov or to do an issur. Preferably in this case is to find a place walkable next to the hospital, and certainly if he knows that he'll be discharged on Shabbos or Yom Tov, he should do it ahead of time. In Shaare Tzedek, we have special rooms for people who are discharged or family members who came to visit and they can't go home because it's already Shabbos. So they have a room that they can stay there and food is provided and there are volunteers. If this can be done in hospitals, maybe chaplains can arrange some things of this kind. That is certainly preferable. If he is still weak and not perfect, but the hospital has discharged him because they don't find a reason to keep him there, especially if he's an elderly patient, and to be mixed up with new places and other places can be confusing to him, then Amira La'akum in this condition is certainly mutar. So the best is to get a non-Jewish driver, whether it's Uber or taxi or private person, it doesn't matter, as long as the driver is a non-Jewish person. And in this case, you can even tell him directly, I want to get to this and this address, because he's still sort of a choyle she'ein bo skona, or even michush, and especially, as I said, if he's elderly and he has to come to a place that he knows, then that is certainly permissible. Now, if he needs an accompanying person, if he needs someone, otherwise he doesn't know where to go, or he's confused, or he feels he needs a support, then again, with a goyish driver, there's actually not much an issue to accompany him and go home. But an issue d'oraisa, driving by himself, that is not permissible in such condition.
Thank you. For a person who has a problem swallowing because of their esophagus, can they mix ground matzah into water and then drink it? If they
So the answer is yes. I mean, it is permissible to ground it. It is permissible to make it a shruya, and then the combination of the two can be even liquid. That's fine. But it has to have the taste of matzah. Matzah has to be with taste. In extreme cases, when there's no way even to get the taste, he's mekayim the mitzvah as long as a kezayis of matzah came into him, which is opposed to maror, which part of the mitzvah is to feel the bitterness. And therefore, if he doesn't feel the taste of bitterness, even though he swallowed it, he's not mekayim the mitzvah. In matzah, it's only a lechatchila that he has to feel the matzah, but if he doesn't, he still is mekayim the mitzvah.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions that have come in on the chat. Does anybody have any other questions to pose at this time?
Yes, I do. And the question of using an alcohol pad to make an area sterile for an injection. I will have this problem on Sunday. I live in Yerushalayim, so it will be Chol HaMoed, not second day Yom Tov. But if I cannot use that pad, while the lecture was going on, I had a look at the pad to see if there's any kind of indication on its packaging, how if it was really chametz or not, and there isn't that. It's just made by a German company. So what are the alternatives? What else can be used to make the
So
area sterile?
most likely, if it's made in Germany, it includes alcohol, which is chametz. So you can clean in any other way. You don't have to clean with alcohol pad.
Liquid soap and water as usual is
Right?
enough?
Yeah, it should be okay. I think from a sterile
Okay.
point of view, it's fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very
Okay,
good.
Arav Drach, I would like to say a final word here. I really want to thank Professor Steinberg, the big professor and the big rabbi, and the combination of the two. We know how unique it is. And toda rabba of sharing of your knowledge in those two areas. Toda to you, Arav Drach, to be the host and the umbrella initiator of this Zoom. I would like to say to the people who are here, you'll be able to go to our website, and I send it in the chat, our address. We have also Facebook. I send it also in the Facebook, and we will try to have the recording of this shiur in those two platforms. Those of you who would like to have the written chapter in Hebrew from the series book of Professor Steinberg, Refuah Ba'alacha, please send it to us. I also gave you my mail, personal mail in the chat, and if not, you can go through the website or the Facebook, and we will send it this file directly to you. I think that all of us would like actually to fulfill the whole mission of La'agdil Torah ve'leha'adira. If you will be able to distribute this shiur all over, I think this will be a good service for the Torah, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and for Chag HaPesach. Chag Sameach ve'kasher lekulam miYerushalayim. Hope to see you again, and we also intend to put this shiur on our website as other shiurim of Professor Steinberg. We have a special section of Refuah V'Halacha. Shalom, shalom, v'chag sameach lekulam.
Toda rabba. Toda
Thank
rabba.
you. I also want to wish everyone Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and everyone should enjoy their families. And I'm glad that we are not at the stage of being quarantined, and hopefully Mena Magefa Menachalatecha would be the blessing now, that we should keep and have the Pesach in derech chirut with our families, and healthy and well. Thank you, and Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Thank you, Rabbi Drach.
Thank you very, very much.
תודה
רבה.
הרב דראץ' ופרופסור סטיינברג, תישארו רגע בשידור.